If we start talking about succession, that means my whole family's going to want me out and it's going to be over. I don't know what I want to do next. I still love working. The whole family's going to start fighting or there's going to be conflict when we actually start talking about this. Those are all fear things that kind of pop up. The shorter your timeline is, the less options that you have.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast. Succession isn't just a legal or financial process. It's a human one. In this episode, Andrea Carpenter, president of the Transition Strategists and host of Your Next Gen Friend, shares how visionary leaders can prepare for transition with intention. Drawing from her own journey as a next gen successor, Andrea offers practical and heartfelt insights for business owners who want to plan for the future, nurture rising leaders, and build a legacy that outlives their calendar. Andrea, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, Harley.
Awesome. Andrea, how did you get into this line of business? It's quite unique.
It is quite unique. When I left my full-time W-2, I thought I was going to grow and start my own business. Long story short, there was this period of who's the person I'm going to serve? Because I had this idea of what I wanted to do. I was trying to figure out who to serve. I'm second generation in my own family. So my dad built and scaled a very successful business, which he ultimately exited. And so it was just this question, when your family has some type of wealth event, for some next gens, it happens early in their life where they're born into it. Their family already has the money. And in some families, it happens later. Suddenly there's kind of this shifting of identity and all these questions around like my life, what am I doing? What is my relationship with money? All of those things. And it's really there's really this tipping point for many next gens where they start to think about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, hey, it would be so great if I could serve next gens in some capacity. So I started thinking about what that would look like. Long story short, I met Elizabeth Ledoux, who's now my business partner. She has always focused on internal transitions. So how do we help families stay together when parents are thinking about passing the business to their kids? It's really about whole person, kind of the human side, like you said, of families and business, because a lot of people think it's an either or choice. My business is going to stay together or my family is going to stay together, and I can't have both. And we've really proven that that's not true. A cool thing about the process that I kind of learned from her is that it also just works for people who are trying to decide what their options are. And so people are thinking a lot about what's important to them, what's the right path. And so I started to think about this in context, back to your question of how did I get into this? The context of successors and next gens in families making a decision to come into a business that's not the one that they started. It's a very different journey. So if you're the founder of your business, there's a certain type of your head is wrapped around what it is, and you're the founder and you have that identity. For someone coming in or taking over your business as a second, their experience is very different. And so that tied really nicely in with my experience and my desire to want to help next gens. And it's turned a little bit meta in the fact that now I'm a successor in Elizabeth's business. So we're on a 5 to 7 year roadmap of our own where she's going to transition and sell all her equity in the business to me, most likely. But we get to decide that together now that we're working on the roadmap together. So that's a little bit of overview about what we do and how I got into that work.
I love it. You've lived it, experienced it, and are continuing to experience it, and really practice what you preach. I love that authenticity and the value you can bring people from that real world experience. And so I'd like to know, you've lived this experience. What has surprised you the most about transitioning from the outside into someone else?
Yeah, timelines are crazy. Because you look at a situation and you're like, that'll probably take 1.5 years or 2. And then she'll be ready to sell the whole business and I'll be taking over and I'll be the greatest leader in the entire world. And that's actually not true. Even when people think about just taking their business to market and selling it, that can take 2 to 3 years for someone going that approach. When you're talking internal transition, the successor, in my case, the amount of leadership development that I need, the amount of understanding of the business and the context and building the relationships with all of the vendors. There's just so much that a founder or someone who started a business is doing that it takes a lot of time. So don't underestimate, I guess, the amount of time that it can take to invite a successor and bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
That's not to even mention from when Elizabeth gave me an invitation to potentially become a successor, it was about 1.5 years until we got our first set of legal documents already done, because there's deciding what's the purchase price. It's what can I afford, but also what is Elizabeth willing to sell it for? What's fair for both of us? What's going to work for our situation? So there's just, as you get into it, there's so many nitty gritty pieces of like what the transition can actually look like. And to zoom out a little bit, that can take so long because our process is so focused on what's important to the people at play. So in Elizabeth and my case, it was, what is Elizabeth thinking about? So what's her next adventure? What does she want for the business? What does she want for all the people who are currently employees? What is her spouse, her husband thinking about retirement and what's next for their life? Because when she started doing that work, she thought she had 10 years and he goes, whoa, but I'm retiring in
Uh,
6 or 7. Like, can we retire together? And so it's not just your decision, right? What's happening with the business. It's bigger than that because there's other people that you're trying to take care of and things that you're trying to do. In my situation, I'm 30. My husband and I were thinking about starting a family. I got pregnant, like right in the middle of kind of this process of starting to step in. And that's just like being a human, right? Is that life changes, things happen. And so I think, I guess what surprised me or the thing that I love the most about our work is it when you think about it early in this context and you know sort of an initial direction that you think you're going, the ability to pivot or make changes inside of all of that increases so exponentially because people are aligned. We know what's important to one another, and we can have a really good conversation about how to then respond to things that come up that maybe we didn't expect.
yeah. Wow. There's so many factors at play there. And yeah, I'm sure you probably just scratched the surface with the examples you gave there. Now, many founders might be wrestling with like the letting go part of it. Do you have certain mindset shifts that you believe are essential when someone is preparing for succession?
Yeah. So we like to use the phrase metamorphosis, and we say kind of 6 areas. There's role shifts. So you kind of being the person that does XYZ in your business, and you then someday no longer being the person that does XYZ. It's not like white or black. Sometimes it's, well, I'm going to keep doing business development until the very end because I love doing that, or because I am the best salesperson for the company and that's what's best for us, but I'm going to transfer off the bookkeeping or I'm going to transfer off the financial piece. And so, kind of the role itself, when you think about power dynamics and like being the leader, being the person that someone looks up to, that's certainly a piece of it. Even the transfer of legacy, like my business is my legacy. And now my legacy is like leaving it for other people, having it continue run. There's certainly a shift that kind of happens there. So those are just a few. We really say that an owner needs to have an idea of what their next adventure is. And a successor or a person coming in also has a next adventure, which is the business, right? My next adventure right now is hopefully someday I'm going to be the owner of the Transition Strategists. Right now, I'm a partial owner, and my next adventure could be becoming the full owner. Elizabeth's next adventure will be no longer being an owner, but maybe there's some type of, is the business still supporting her in some capacity? Is she still working a little bit? What are the things she likes to do? So here people start to think about family. They start like being with family, being with grandkids. People talk about travel. People always joke about golf, right? Well, golf isn't really a next adventure. A lot of people are looking for philanthropic causes that they care about. Maybe they're going to sit on boards. Maybe they want to do mentoring. Really, whatever that is, if there's nothing for you to move towards, you're never going to step out of the way of the person coming in, especially in an internal succession. And if you think, hey, I want to sell, selling is the thing that is right for me and my business. Like, I'm a big fan. Like, that's great. But the number of people I talk to that have sold their business and are not happy, heartbreaking to think of someone leaving their business and like, yeah, I made money. And it's not usually about the transaction. That's the problem. It's, I wasn't able to take care of my employees in the way that I wanted. Or I thought that the person that was going to buy my company was going to do XYZ. And they really just stripped it for parts. They didn't do that. Or they don't really know like what's coming up next in their life. They haven't talked to their spouse about the time that they're going to have together now as a family and being around, and things just like shift, right? Because your identity is so tied to the business that you've built and you weren't emotionally or mentally prepared for that. And so I would say the same process, whether you're doing internal succession, is important for business owners, even if they know they're going to exit, because you need to know what your non negotiables are. So as you evaluate deals and offers, you can make sure that you're choosing something that's aligned for you.
Yeah. There's so much to go into there. One thing I kind of cued in is the urgency and timeline. How can leaders start thinking about succession before it becomes urgent and it might be too late, whether it is the sale or the internal transition? And then what are the biggest mistakes you see happen when they don't?
Yeah, as much time as you can give yourself. So now I always say that with a little bit of caveat. We have an assessment called the IMAP. I'm pretty futurist. A lot of founders and visionaries, they're futurists. They think about the future a lot. I also, on my Clifton strengths, I am a strategic thinker. And so for me, if I don't see that big picture or what's coming up, how do I know that I'm making decisions today that are kind of aligned? We see a lot of visionaries that are kind of like this. The furthest out we've ever seen someone, especially when you're talking family, I don't know if there's too early to really start thinking about it. I talked to a business owner over the weekend and he has a son, but the son's only 19. He's going into the Marines, but he thinks his son could be the person who eventually takes over the business. Son is at least 5 years in the Marines, and then who knows where that kind of extends to, maybe 10 years before he would be ready. That doesn't exactly align with what the business owner is thinking about their timeline to get out of the business, because they would like to be out in 4 to 5 years of day to day. And so we started talking, well, do you need to hire a management team? Is there something else that you could put in place? Are there strategic hires that you could make which would get you your time back, but still keep the business in your family in case your kids want it? In that case, he's looking at a 10 to 15 year roadmap, right? Because even then, once the son comes back, you have to train the son, make sure he's ready. There's other kids. So what's the equity? What's going to make that fair? So when you're talking families, I don't think there's too early to start to think about all the different factors, especially when there's a lot of leadership growth that the successors need to go through. If you're like, there's really no one I would be interested in passing it to. And I'll also caveat, an employee team, we've worked with some people who are trying to do employee or like manager buyouts. So it's going from one owner to like 3 or 4 key managers who are going to be like the next generation of growth. That's almost the same timeline as a family. We say family business, but I would say if you're taking care of people and you're passing it in that way, it's really about the relationship transition in a way, right? If you're like, I'm going to sell, well, the market is shifting all the time. You don't know what's going to come up. Do you need to make key hires to make the business more valuable now? Those are all really important things to think about. And so starting 3 to 5 years before you're ready to actually go to the investment bank, the M&A firm, the business broker, really having a concrete idea of where you're going, what the value of that business needs to be. Like, what's your number? Like, is the business even worth what you need to, like, if you had this kind of sale and this exit event, are you going to have to keep working or start something new to be enough income? Or is there going to be enough income when you look at investments and all those other things? And that's where your wealth advisors can kind of play in on this team as well. But so, yeah, I'm a big proponent of at least 3 to 5 years before you're thinking about it. You never know when there's going to be a health scare. And again, that helps kind of pivot it. And so you ask about the mistakes that we see people make. It's when you have fear. Likely the hesitancy to want to start is some type of fear, is a lot of what I see. Well, if we start talking about succession, that means my whole family's going to want me out and it's going to be over. I don't know what I want to do next. I still love working.
Yeah.
The whole family is going to start fighting, or there's going to be conflict when we actually start talking about this. Those are all fear things that kind of pop up. And so, okay, we'll just wait. We'll do it a little bit later, and it shortens your timeline. And the shorter your timeline is, the less options that you have at the end of the day. Because there's cool tax things and estate structures and all this stuff that we can help you think of with your estate attorneys and your brokers or whatever else. But a lot of them take time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I talked to a really cool estate lawyer the other day, and he's talking about one of the like founders share and the founders credits. If your business isn't already a C Corp, you can turn it into that. If you have at least 5 years, then the first, like, I think it's $15 million of a sale, the tax is significantly reduced on those. That stuff takes time, because if you
Yeah.
don't have 5 years left in your business, then there's no reason to attempt or try that strategy. And so there's implications on other things as well. So I would say that that's one of the biggest, is letting that fear kind of prevent you from starting and waiting until that point where, like, shoot, my kids are really pushing me now, or someone got sick, or I really need time back. And then your options decrease a lot in terms of what's possible.
Every day, your top performers are buried under emails, scheduling, and reporting. Work that doesn't move the needle. The result? Frustration, burnout, and worst of all, lost revenue. That's why we created the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers, a simple, battle-tested framework to eliminate busy work and unlock your team's full potential. Inside, you'll get the exact steps top executives use to retain A players, boost productivity, and free up their team for high-impact work. Stop losing revenue. Go to workergenics.com/growthhub or check the episode notes to download the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers now. Right. What would you say to someone who maybe has that fear of, what's the family dynamic going to be with? Maybe they've got multiple children. Some may want in the business, some may not. Some may want equity or just cash, or like there might be people feeling, like it's unfair. How do you sort those kind of things out, or what advice would you have to someone in a situation like that as they are planning a potential transition?
Yeah. As second generation myself, the best thing that my parents did was to leave communication really open. Because the families that we see where things have already kind of gone off the rails, it's because no one is talking to each other. So I think one of the best gifts that you can give is starting a dialogue, admitting that you don't know what the answers are, but you're going to find people to help support, that you realize it's not just your decision. It is 100% like everyone sharing what's important to them and where they want to go. And that's how we can design a transition strategy that's going to work for everyone, because you've basically nailed it on the head. You have 3 kids, right? Maybe one wants to come in, maybe one doesn't, maybe they're all friends, maybe they're not. We see families where, okay, there's one kid who's like working in the business, but he's the baby of the family. His sisters don't really think it's fair, right? That like he would get the business. And now, like in this family that I'm thinking of, they're all just, there's frustration. They're not talking. People are perceiving that the other person is not doing something and they just want to cash out. They don't even understand the value of the business, how much it would be worth. And if it just got sold today, how much of that is going to go to taxes? And so mom is trying to hold this family together, and she's considering different strategies. And maybe it should be gifted after she passes. If she's already a little bit older, maybe wait, then the kids get the step up, right? They don't have to pay so much tax on it. Maybe the brother needs to buy the other 2 out. It is so dependent on the family, what people are looking for, what the parents perceive as fair, how you look at the asset. Is your business a family asset, or is your business the business asset, which your kids have the opportunity to buy into and participate in that? There's a huge distinction there, which would massively change how we would write the transition plan to make it fair and equitable. And so we talk about that a lot in families. It's about what the parents really want. Like, what is your objective for what this is going to do for your family? What is the invitation? How does someone get brought in to start to think about that? I would say not talking about it is the number one thing that could make it start to go off the rails and not be in alignment with what people are, what's really going to be best for the family.
We've talked a lot about the challenges and potential conflicts. Maybe you could share a story where a family navigated this transition exceptionally well and what others might be able to learn from.
Yeah. So there's a really cool family that we've been helping. They're still in the process of navigating it, but when they came in, you could tell that there's tension, there's conflict. People are coming in and they're unsure. Like, you come in a room and you can like see everyone's arms kind of crossed over their chest. They're not really ready to show up, and they think like, this isn't even worth my time, right? My parents are just going to do what my parents are going to do, and I don't even need to engage. That's kind of like from a next gen perspective. And the parents are like, my kids aren't even going to show up. They're not going to engage. They don't really want this. Like, this is just going to be a disaster because everyone's going to fight, and then no one's going to be sitting around the Thanksgiving table next year. Like, it's all going to be over. And when people come in with at least some level, what we saw in this family, they walk in with some level of willingness. Like, you can tell each person wants it to work, but they're credulous about what other people are thinking. We love to start with an assessment called the IMAP. It actually came out of the same university as DISC and Myers-Briggs back in the 70s. And the only difference is this one kind of stayed in private companies. So it's one that now we just use with our clients and our teams. This is really about the natural wiring of a person and also how they want and like to be influenced. And the second you're able to say, hey, look, Andrea has a really good skill in this. And Harley, he's really got that like creative developer. He's great at coming up with ideas. And Andrea, she sits a little bit more on the refiner end. So she loves taking ideas and turning them into something new. Oh, and Andrea's a really high analyst. So it's super important to her that like before she speaks, everything is perfect and lined up in her mind. She's afraid of other people perceiving her as not being perfect. But Dad, he's a big director. Like he's just going to tell you exactly how it is and he's not here to mess around. And as we go through this and we talk about how people show up, that's the first step and like, oh, you're not doing that to like purposefully annoy me. You're just doing that because that's how you're naturally wired. And you can start to have a conversation. Elizabeth and I do this a lot. I'm like, hey, your persuader is really coming out a little too strong right now, or you're being a little bit too adaptable. I'm more of a planner. So I'm trying to get a plan here. And your adaptability is kind of fighting with that. Can we talk and come up with a better way? And it suddenly is like, oh yeah, I'm just asking you to meet me where I'm at. And you can now understand where I'm coming from. And it's one tool for people to kind of talk together. So we like using that. The second tool is the objectives matrix, which is one of my favorite tools that we use with our clients. And that's really about what's most important to you in the transition. And any person in the room, we have them go around and they read what's most important to them and the emotion that can come up when people are actually having an honest conversation and saying for the first time, like, this is what's important to me in the business. Like the family I'm thinking of, Elizabeth was the one kind of facilitating this retreat. She said they had the tissue box and it just like traveled around the room with all the people because it was the first time that people in this family had actually honestly talked with one another about what was important. And they
Wow.
leave the room, the conflict is either resolved or it feels like there's no more conflict. And
Mhm.
there's just excitement about the future. And so that's where going through this process of inviting people to share what's important to them and understanding how they're like wired is an amazing first step at making sure that your business transition is really truly honoring those people and being designed around what's most important, which is your human capital, also like the legacy of the business and all the other things, because the business helps the employees, it helps your community. So we're not trying to get rid of any of those things either. And the process helps invite the whole family in. I would say those are my happiest success stories are when families get in the room, you can tell they're hesitant. And by the end, they're much more open. And suddenly they're in this space of creativity, right? We're no longer defensive of that's mine. No, that's mine. I should get that. That's not fair. It's like, oh, I know that having this money, like having some influx of cash, would be really important or helpful for your life because you have an objective to start a nonprofit that does courses for foster children or whatever it is, right? But me, my vision is to work in this business and I want to grow it. I loved working with my dad. I always did this thing. I want to work in the business. Now those two siblings have shared where they're at, and the one can say, hey, what if I bought your share out? Or what if you just came onto the board? Or whatever else, right? You can
Yeah.
start to design around that. So those are, I would say, the biggest success stories sit in that space of people opening and sharing and starting to communicate more.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I imagine there's so many times where people coming into it might think that, even reading off what they value is going to create more conflict. It's like, oh, we're all going to want the same thing because everyone typically is thinking about themselves and then projecting that. And then hearing what everyone else really does value creates so many opportunities where more often than not, I imagine it all can work out fine, that there's not actually that much conflict in what the people value. And there's solutions that you can help them design to make sure everybody's needs are met.
And this is not all flowers and butterflies, right? Not everyone walks away. I would say almost no one walks away with 100% of what they want. But we do want to surface what are your deal breakers. Because if it's a deal breaker for you, for example, and Elizabeth in mine, she had a deal breaker that she wanted to be majority owner until the day that she was ready to step out and retire. And I had one on my list that I would love to be majority owner from the day I start. But it wasn't a deal breaker for me. It was a deal breaker for her. Suddenly, the two of us can look at that and we can have a conversation. Is that actually something that I'm willing to give up? It was. Okay, we still have a deal. Like we can still move forward. If we both had a deal breaker that was in conflict with one another, then we would know that that wasn't even something worth pursuing. And let's catch it early so that we don't waste a ton of time drafting legal documents and working with lawyers. Like, let's figure out all that stuff before we get to the point of bringing a lawyer in at $500 an hour.
Right. That's so smart. Now, for leaders who are ready to start defining their next adventure, where should they begin and how did they do it without feeling like they're abandoning what they built?
That's a really good question. The process can take a while. We like to start with, I mentioned the tool, the objectives matrix, which actually, Harley, good segue. I do have a downloadable version of this with a little video of me talking through how you can start to think about that. And you can get that at transitionstrategist.com/workergenics. And I'm sure
We'll
Harley
make sure
will
that's
put
in the
it in
show
the
notes
show
too.
notes. That objectives matrix, because it focuses on what you want to do. And is it something I'm going to continue doing? Is it a short-term goal? Is it a long-term goal? What's important for your spouse? What's important for your family? So that would be you and your kids. What's important for your extended family? Is there any other extended family that you're thinking about? Maybe your parents, maybe cousins or aunts and uncles, whatever that looks like. We're also looking at if you have a partner in your business, what do you want for that person? What do you want for your employees? What do you want for your successors? So you're going to write that down, all of those things. And it's a good tool to start thinking about kind of orienting to the future because what's important to you. And there's a lot of examples in there. Things that like, is your spirituality important to you? Is there philanthropic causes that are important to you? How are you spending your mornings? How are you spending your evenings? Is there a certain amount of time you're spending with certain people? We want to think through and start to write down all of that stuff. And that'll start to orient you to like, okay, maybe there is kind of this future beyond the business. And it's okay if right now the thing you want to continue doing is working in your business. Like it's really valuable for you to know, like, I am enjoying this season. I love working. I love creating this value. Like you probably do not want to design a transition plan that would put you out in 2 to 3 years if that's something that you really love doing. So I invite you to do that. I also would invite you to bring in your family if they are involved in this process. I've used this tool in accountability groups before because it really helps align like what are the choices I have ahead and are they actually going to help me long term achieve the objectives that I say I want to do in my life? Because eventually there's a point where working in your business might not help you achieve the objectives that you say you want to do or the things you want to do. So that's a really great place to start to think about the future of your business. And then eventually when we run and we work with clients, we'll stack all those up. Again, that's kind of that tool for the family that wasn't really communicating or didn't know that there was a path forward. They're sharing their objective matrices with each other. And it's just a really great conversation starter. So I would invite you as well to start to do that because when you learn about the next adventure your spouse is thinking about and the next adventure your kids are thinking about, that can also help open your perspective of what a transition or the future of the business or even the future of your family could look like.
Wow, so many amazing insights and examples you've shared today. Thank you so much, Andrea. If people want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn, Andrea Carpenter. And I host my own podcast for successors and next gens in family business and navigating this. So if you have children or you're a next gen yourself, kind of working inside the business, that is your next gen friend. And I'm also on Instagram at your next gen friend. And then again, that resource, that objectives matrix, transitionstrategist.com/workergenics.
Thank you so much for sharing these resources with our audience. Now, those of you listening, if you got value from this episode, do one quick thing. Hit the like and subscribe so you don't miss future strategies to help you scale smarter. And if you know a business owner or colleague who could use this information, share this episode with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a quick rating. It helps us reach more leaders like you. And again, thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.